Hi there, welcome to this presentation of the Gospel in the Stars, or the story of the good news that is embedded within the names of the constellations and the names of the stars within the constellations that are along the line of the path of the sun, or the ecliptic that we know as the zodiac, as well as the surrounding constellations surrounding that. My name is Monica Hayden. I'm a I was a religious studies major. And I'm an avid student of the scriptures and just enamored believer in the God of the Bible. And the reason that I set out on this journey to create this series for you about the gospel and the stars is I read a book that was printed in the 1800s, an old book by a man named Joseph Seiss called The Gospel and the Stars, and it was so intriguing to me. I had never heard this information in all of my encounters in any Christian environment. I'd always heard that astrology was idolatry and that it was wrong, and so I didn't really look into it. But the more that I started to learn about what God did on the day of creation when he set up this astonishing clock in the sky, this precision in the sky above us and below us and around us, that creates what the author of the Gospel of the Stars called the grand sentence that we are becoming more and more illiterate of in our day. The more we are pulled indoors with our televisions, we see it less and less. But I was so moved by it that I thought, this is a story that needs to be told. And I couldn't find anything online that was, at least on YouTube, that was really sharing what I found. And I spent several months researching it, making sure it was true. And what I found was beyond what the book said. It was just staggering, and I'm here to share it with you. So I can't give credit to this myself. Other people have discovered it, and I have followed in their footsteps, though I have come to some slightly different conclusions than they have. But I think you'll enjoy it. If you're looking for evidences outside of the Bible that the Bible might be true, I think this one's pretty astonishing, at least very interesting, if nothing else. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to give you a context in which the stars came about. So in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, I'm just going to read this to you quickly so you get the gist. It said, "There appeared a great wonder," or a sign, "in heaven. A woman clothed in the sun, the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven," or another sign. "Behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on his head. His tail drew a third of the part of the stars of heaven, and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered," so she was pregnant, having a baby, "to devour her and to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne." Okay, skipping right down to the next verse. "There was war in heaven. Michael, who is the archangel, and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. The great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him." Okay, so that's the context in which the world was made. So in that context, there's these 7 days of creation that are presented in Genesis chapter 1. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but I want to skip down after, God makes the light and the land and separates the water. And the fourth day of creation, uh, he says, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to do four different things. Okay, so he's talking about the sun, moon, and stars. They were to divide the day from the night. Okay, that's one thing. That's an obvious thing. Let them be for signs, for seasons, for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament. Okay, so obviously the light one. I want to draw your attention really to two things. First is they were to be for the calendar, okay, to set up times that God would set up for the moon, the month, the year, you know, the track of the earth around the sun one time, for days, the spin of the earth one time, and the seasons, okay? The seasons in ancient Egypt and Babylon and China and all these, they were really tracked by the stars. In fact, the Great Pyramids were set up, and some of the temples in ancient Egypt set up to track the star called Sirius. It's a very bright star in the heaven, and they knew when that rose above the horizon that was an indicator that it was time to start planting. It was very clear to them that the Nile was going to start swelling again, and they needed to get on board and start doing that, or they wouldn't have food the next year. So very important things were connected with the stars. The other thing I want to bring out is this word right here, signs. Okay, let them be for signs. Let's look at this for a while. Okay, so sorry, I'm going to my PowerPoint here. Okay, the word signs in the Strong's Concordance is Auf in the Hebrew, and what that word meant was to appear or assent as a signal, a beacon, a flag, a monument, an omen, evidence, mark, or a miracle. So not only were these things set in this clock-like manner to tick off the years and the days and the months, but they're also there, according to God, on the day he created them, to communicate with humankind that he hadn't even created yet, but he was about to in a few days, to tell them something's going on here. I want you to pay attention. So this is very interesting, because you'll notice if you go and read the story of the death of Jesus Christ, that at his death there was a solar eclipse. The whole sky got dark for about 3 hours while he was dying. Then it came back out. Also, you'll see the story in the Gospels about the wise men who came from the east, following a star that brought them straight to where Jesus was born and where he was being raised, so that they could worship him as the Messiah. Then there's also indicators in the book of Joel and the book of Acts and in the books of Matthew and Luke, I believe, where Jesus himself says that this to watch for the moon to turn to blood, things like that. So they weren't just to mark off time, although that was one of the main things that they were going to be used for, but they were also for God to send messages to humankind, for those that were paying attention to them. Not everybody does. So let's look now at Psalms 19. This one I always glossed over when I was younger. I just thought it was a nice nature poem. I never saw what I see today now that I know more about the stars. So it says in verse 1, the heavens declare the glory of God. Now the glory of God is something we're going to discuss especially when we talk about the constellation Libra, the scales and the judgment, and the cross and the crown that are surrounding that one and its deacons. But the glory of God is something that he cannot give to himself. It's sort of like, I cannot make you love me. So of course we can look up in awe at the magnitude and the hugeness of the universe when we look at the stars, but this, I believe, is talking about something much deeper than that, much more profound than just a sense of general awe. It's also something far more specific. So it says the firmament shows his handiwork day unto day. So day after day, it's doing something. It's uttering speech. It's talking to us. Now remember, one of the reasons he created them is to talk to us, to send us messages through them. Night after night, it reveals knowledge. There's no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Now what's interesting here is after the Tower of Babel, when the languages were split, it's saying here, this is post-Babel when it's written, there's no language or speech where their voice is not heard. So the story didn't get lost because the languages changed. Their line has gone out throughout all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. So I want to spend some time looking at this word, their line, and also their words. I'm going to use a little thing here called Stellarium. It's a free download. Anybody can download it. And it shows right now and at any time and any place in the past what the stars and the planets and the sun and the moon were doing. So I've got these pictures turned on so you can see them, but I want you to notice this red line. This is the path of the sun through the sky. It's called the ecliptic, and the zodiac is the constellations that fall along this line. So when Psalms says, where did that go again? Right here, their line has gone out through all the earth, and it's uttering speech, and it's revealing knowledge, and it has words in it that go to the end of the world that all languages can understand. That's something very interesting. Now, if you study ancient cultures at all, you'll see that almost all their investments, their heavy investments of time and labor and energy and money, were to build these buildings, these massive buildings that were tracking the stars. And it's in all these ancient cultures, even in the Mayan and some of the South American cultures, all over Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. They're tracking these stars. And the question is why? Like, why are they paying such special attention to this, the astronomy of the day? And what we know from ancient records and from what we know today from astronomy is that the ancient Babylonians were as precise today in their accounting of the stars as we are now with our advanced technologies. And all these ancient cultures had these same signs that we still have today, that they all would look at this weird thing that looks like, to me, let me go back here, that looks like, where is it? Sorry. There it is. Nothing. It looks like nothing. And they would look at that and they would all say in all these different nations, that right there, my young boy and girl, that is a girl. And she is not just a girl, she is a virgin. And she's not just a virgin, she's got wheat in her hand. They all said this about this particular constellation. So I find that very interesting that that carried over. Now, what does that mean? So let's take this a little deeper. I'm going to take you to the next slide. And we'll talk about what this means, that their words went to the ends of the earth. What in the world is that? What are those words? So in Psalm 147 and Isaiah 40, it says that God calls the stars by name. He counts the number of the stars. He calls them all by name. And here again, he sits above the circle of the earth, stretches out the heavens like a curtain. Lift up your eyes on high and see who created these things, who brings out their hosts by number. He calls them all by name. Now in the Bible itself, in the earliest known writings that we have, of course Genesis talks about creation. But before Genesis was written, the book of Job, we believe, was the earliest book to be written, as far as its chronology of its ancientness. And Job was a man who was alive during the time of Abraham, we think, who lived in the Fertile Crescent, the cradle of civilization around ancient Babylon and Sumer. He's from the land of Uz, and that's all in that Fertile Crescent area. And toward the end of the book, God and Job are talking back and forth, and God is talking to him about the different constellations that he claims that he named. We've got the Pleiades here. We've got Orion. We've got Arcturus, that's the name of a single star within a constellation. And then God says, can you bring forth the Mazzaroth in its season? And scholars, that word Mazzaroth has been transliterated, meaning it's just shared as syllables, because the interpreters weren't sure what it meant. It's just the Mazzaroth. And scholars believe, based upon its context within the constellations and talking about the ordinance of heaven and how it's brought out in its season, perhaps the Mazzaroth is referring to what we know today to be the line of the sun that passes through 12 constellations that we know of as the zodiac. Let me turn these back on here. There they are. So it starts in ancient Babylonian times. The first star, the first constellation, I should say, of the zodiac was this virgin, Virgo, who had this thing in her hand, this wheat. And then it goes on from there, this direction, to the Libra. This is the scales. Then the scorpion. Then this centaur, we call Sagittarius, meaning the archer. Then it goes on to this goat fish called Capricorn, Aquarius, the water bearer, then over to Pisces, the fish, then Aries, the lamb, then Taurus, the bull, then Gemini, the twins, then Cancer, the crab, and then Leo, the lion, and then it starts over again. And every day, of course, the sun goes through all 12 of these because it's going through them, but whenever the sun rises above the horizon, whatever image it's rising in at that time, that's the sign that they say that you're in at the time. So some of the signs last a little longer, like she's longer than, say, even Scorpios or Libra. Okay, so they're not all equidistant, but one of the things that I learned in my research that was very interesting to me was that each of these constellations in the ancient zodiacs also had what they called a decan or a decan, meaning 10 degrees. So for every, there was 360 degrees for the total circle. Every 10 degrees had a decan with it, and or the constellation itself. So with Virgo, for example, is these other constellations that correspond to her, and with Libra is some others that correspond to it. So we'll get into all the details on that in a minute as we go through, but I just want you to note that there's not just 12 when you look at it that way. The line of the sun passes through 12, but there are 48 constellations that we'll be exploring, and they need to be taken together in order for the story to tell itself right. Okay, otherwise you're just like, what, a centaur and a scales and a crab and a woman, what? So the other issue that you have to know, where did I go here? Here we go. When it says he calls them by name, is that not only are the constellations named, like for example this is Aquarius, but the stars, the bright stars that make up the constellations, were also given names. And those names have been preserved from the ancient Babylonian times for us in the Arabic language. The pre-Islamic Arabs were very good at keeping track of these things, and we have them today. So when you read the story, the name of the stars within the names of the constellations, both along the zodiac and the decans that go along with them, then you come to what we know as the story that's in the stars. So let's talk about the context now of that story. We talked about the war in heaven, but then once we get to earth, something very interesting happens. Adam and Eve are there in the Garden of Eden, of course, and the snake, Satan, is limited in his ability to influence them unless they go to him. And that is at the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And of course, God says, don't go over there. I don't want you to be exposed to that. It's not going to be good for you. And Eve decides she wants to check it out anyway one day. And when she does, God comes to her and she says, "What have you done?" And she says, "The serpent deceived me and I ate this fruit that you told me not to eat." And the serpent, of course, is Satan in that form. And God says to the serpent, and this is one thing I want you to note because it's going to show up in the stars. "Because you did this, you are cursed, and I will put enmity," meaning conflict or aggravation, "between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He," her seed, this is a singular person, "will bruise your head," the serpent's head, "but you will bruise his heel." So the seed of the woman, who's going to come through her as one of her children, is going to defeat and conquer and kill the snake. But in the process, he will be wounded. All right, from here, I want to take a little break so we can break these videos up because they're going to get too long. But we're going to dive into the first 4 of the stars, starting with Virgo.